Night always hides what the light insists on ignoring. As the rain falls softly over the roof, slow, patient, steady, the air begins to change almost without you noticing, as if the night itself were breathing. There are figures in history that remain far longer than they should, not because they are loud, but because they are quiet, because they settle into memory and refuse to leave. Some survive because they carry truths buried so deeply that time itself grows tired of hiding them. Others remain because they were reshaped, softened, rewritten, until their original form slowly faded away. Santa Claus is one of those figures, not the smiling man in red, not the familiar image glowing behind December windows, but something older, something that existed long before the story became gentle, before Christmas had a name, before St. Nicholas, before words were written down. There was only winter, long nights, frozen ground, silent forests, and a presence that belonged to that darkness, a watcher of the world when the sun stayed away, when cold ruled the land, when silence felt alive, something that moved quietly while others slept. And now, here, in the calm of this rainy night, you are about to drift into a story that is rarely told. An older story, a softer story, hidden beneath layers of tradition and time. A figure once feared, respected, honored, slowly transformed into something safe, something familiar. But nothing ancient ever truly disappears. It simply changes and waits. Tonight, you will move gently through forgotten layers, through memories shaped by cold nights and quiet rituals, through symbols that survived even when their meaning was lost. There is no rush here, no need to stay fully awake. Just listen, and let the rain carry the story forward. The night is deepening, the rhythm is slowing. Welcome to History After Nightfall. The Guardian of Winter. You close your eyes. The night feels dense, almost liquid, and the cold wind moves slowly across the forgotten hills of the north. There is no music here, no light, no trace of the cheerful images the modern world associates with Christmas. What exists is something older, an echo that comes before language, before civilization, before memory itself. It is here, in this deep silence, that the true Santa Claus is born. Not the smiling old man dressed in red, not the familiar symbol of gentle kindness, but an ancient presence that walked among snow and shadow long before the first kingdoms of Europe ever rose. In ancient times, when forests stood taller and the sun vanished for entire months, the peoples of the north did not see winter as a season. They believed it was alive. Cold was a force that moved, judged, rewarded, and punished. Darkness was his cloak. Ice was his voice. And amongst these forces, there was another presence. One that did not destroy, but observed. The ancient peoples had many names for him. Some called him the Guardian of Winter. Others, the Old One of the North. Some knew him as the bringer of gifts and debts. The names changed. The essence did not. He crossed between worlds carrying two things: gifts and judgment. He was not good. He was not evil. He was ancient. And everything ancient carries more than one face. Imagine a small village in ancestral Scandinavia. Wooden houses, narrow windows, smoke rising slowly into the night air. The sky holds a soft blue darkness, the kind that exists only where the sun almost never appears. The wind moves gently, making the land feel alive beneath your feet. Then, a sound. Not a human step, not an animal. Something in between. A presence that knows the hidden parts of the forest, one that does not fear winter because it belongs to it. The elders used to warn the children, when the snow creaks and no one is there, he is near. When the guardian passed through a village, people said the world felt different. The fire flickered, but never went out. The air felt lighter, as if something heavy had moved on. That night strange dreams came, dreams where past and future blended quietly together, and by morning objects appeared at doorways, small carvings, dried fruits, fragments of wood marked with unfamiliar symbols. They were not gifts meant to please, they were messages. The villagers believed the guardian never arrived suddenly. They said his presence announced itself slowly through small changes in the night. The wind softened. The snow seemed to listen. Even the silence felt deeper, as if the world were holding its breath. No one dared to look directly into the forest. Doors remained closed. Voices grew quiet. It was not fear alone that kept them still. It was respect, because the guardian did not belong to the world of humans. He belonged to the space between seasons, between endings and beginnings. Those who felt his presence understood something without words. Winter was not an enemy. It was a test, and the guardian was his witness. And this is where the tradition truly begins. Gifts, judgments, and a long memory. These objects carried meaning. Some were signs of protection, others were warnings. Some represented a death that would one day return. Everything the guardian left behind was a silent agreement between humans and winter itself. He was feared and respected. The people did not ask him for favors. They only acknowledged his presence. During the winter solstice, the northern peoples believed the veil between worlds grew thin. The air felt different. Sounds travelled farther. Shadows seemed to linger longer than usual. The cold tested the weak. The darkness revealed what daylight often hid. And the guardian of the myth walked amongst them. Banners and trees and small carvings at their doors. Not as often, but as quiet sounds of aroma. A message without words. We know you can sleep. Walk in peace during the home. Some accounts say animals fell silent from the land. Others say certain children could dance without saying anything at all. They felt watched, not judged, simply seen. Those who came to see him described not only, but a full figure waxed in pale blue light, accompanied by a great deer-armed being, their eyes glowing softly in the dark. This is where the first image of the rainbow is born. They did not fly. They moved slowly, crossing spaces the human eye could not follow. The guardian did not give to reward kindness. He gave to restore balance. Each object carried purpose. Some brought safety. Others carried consequence. Because winter itself demanded balance. The oldest solstice traditions speak of a strong blue fire that sometimes appeared in remote places. It gave no wood, it left no ash, only a quiet circle in the snow. For the ancient people, this was proof that the guardian had stopped to observe the world. They believed that in these moments he looked into the past, weighed the present, and generally marked the future. This belief survived through centuries, slowly transforming into the idea that he sees everything, that nothing escapes his awareness, and finds itself remembered. The ancients, being good was not about simple behavior. It was about courage, honesty, respect for the cycle of life and death. The guardian did not announce his judgments. He passed quietly, like the wind through frozen trees, and that silence stayed. As the world changed, cities rose and religion spread. The guardian slowly faded into folklore. The judge became a giver. The shadow became a story. But something essential remains. Even in his modern form, his presence is not entirely human. He arrives from the darkest night. He moves between worlds. He does not age. The mask changed. The spirit did not. And this is only the beginning of his story. Winter darkness has always been more than the absence of light. For ancient peoples, it was a living boundary, something that breathed, that observed, that judged. And there was one specific moment, a night so long it seemed to exist outside of time, when that boundary became thin, almost transparent. It was on this night that the Old One crossed. Today, you call him Santa Claus, but that name carries only a distant echo of what he truly was, a mediator between the world of the living and the world of those who had already passed. In snow-covered villages, elders would often say, "This is the night when the paths open." Invisible paths, silent paths, paths that cut through reality like rivers of shadow flowing between homes, and the guardian walked upon them. There is something you must understand before going further. For the oldest cultures, there was no good and evil as we understand them today. There was balance. There were forces that demanded respect. There were entities that existed not to protect, but to keep the entire world functioning. The Old One was one of those forces. He did not come to help. He came to keep the boundary stable, between the living and the dead, between those who still breathed and those waiting for another winter, between those who carried light and those whose flame had already faded. At that time, it was believed that every home carried a spark, not only physical fire, but spiritual fire. This spark could not be seen by human eyes, but it was visible to him, and that is precisely why he walked only during the deepest winter, because cold was the only element capable of revealing the truth of souls. Most people fear the dark, but the guardian feared the light. In light, everything looked the same, and he needed truth, not appearance. Winter reveals essence, the ancients said. That is why, for centuries, the presence of the Old One of Winter was always associated with silent judgment, not moral judgment, energetic judgment. Homes filled with broken rituals, divided families, hidden resentments, restless spirits, all emitted an unstable flame. These were the homes where he lingered longer. He observed, he listened, he felt the weight of the place, and then he decided. Some received protection, others received only silence, a frozen silence that meant spiritual abandonment, not punishment. What the living feared then, and still fear now, is the same thing, abandonment. And here is where the true meaning of the word gift is born. Today, you believe gifts are rewards or symbols of kindness, but in ancient cultures, a gift was something else entirely, a ritual exchange, an object offered to keep the guardian satisfied, to ensure he would keep walking, to ensure he would not remain too long watching that home. Food was offered, burnt herbs, talismans, wooden carvings, a small portion of the stored harvest. These were not celebrations, they were contracts, silent treaties between humans and the entity that separated this world from the other. Over time, the act of giving to him became the act of giving to one another, and the ritual origin of gifts was forgotten. But the habit remained, as always happens with symbols that are too old. when memory fades, behavior survives. Long before reindeer became magical animals pulling a sleigh, they were something else entirely. Ancient peoples believed certain animals could see what humans could not. Reindeer were seen as creatures that walked between dimensions, not because of their antlers, not because of their strength, but because of their eyes. Large, dark, always alert. Eyes that reflected what existed beyond the surface. There were stories that said, where the reindeer looks, the spirit passes. That is why the guardian was always accompanied by them, not as companions, but as sentinels. They were the eyes he used to see what humans hid even from themselves. When you see reindeer flying in modern images, this is not far from ancient symbolism. For northern peoples, shamans wore reindeer skins and antlers during rituals to cross into the spiritual world. Reindeer were guides of transition, and the guardian was transition itself. The modern image of Santa Claus shows bright, cheerful red, but the original red carried a far more brutal meaning. Red was the color of fire that resisted winter, of life-defying death, of blood in ritual offerings. For centuries, spiritual leaders wore red cloaks during the longest night, while asking the guardian to spare their villages. Shamans walked with torches, their garments glowing against the snow. And at some symbolic point in history, this color became the garment of the guardian himself. It was not decoration, it was a warning. Red meant, here walks the one who crosses boundaries. Later, as new religions emerged, symbols were transformed. Red shifted from ritual meaning to commercial color, but colors never forget their meaning. Only humans do. If red was the blood of fire, green was the memory of the sleeping earth. Long before being replaced, green represented rebirth, endurance, eternity, and connection to the ancestral world. For the ancients, green was not hope. Green was memory that never dies. The guardian wore green to remind the living that even in the apparent death of winter, something always remains. The white beard is one of the most distorted symbols of all. Today, it is aesthetic. In antiquity, it was a sign. He did not belong to time. He belonged to the cycle. White was the color of ice, age, accumulated wisdom, and above all, spirit. The Old One of Winter was not depicted as human. His beard was described as an extension of the snow itself, always moving, like mist drifting around him. When he was transformed into Santa Claus, the human image simplified something far deeper. He did not enter through chimneys. He entered through the boundary between worlds. The earliest wooden homes had an opening at the top, not a modern chimney. That opening was symbolic, a vertical axis, a passage point. Ancient peoples believed every home had a place where the spiritual world touched the physical. That was where he entered. As traditions changed, this passage was reinterpreted. The essence remained. The meaning vanished. The guardian did not need to enter physically. He crossed. And this crossing explains why, on certain nights, the air inside homes felt different. Why flames flickered without wind. Why shadows seemed to lean towards the door. His presence was never physical. It was energetic. When a home received his blessing, it meant only one thing. That family would survive the winter. That was the gift. Not toys, not sweets, not gold. Life. This idea, over centuries, became materialized, but the symbol remains. To give a gift is still to offer protection, even if you no longer remember why. There has always been a deep connection between the guardian and children, not because of joy, not because of innocence. Ancient cultures believed that during winter, children were the most vulnerable souls, not only physically, but spiritually. The soul of a child is a small flame, the elders said. Winter tries to extinguish it. Protective objects were placed beside children's beds during the longest night, not to protect them from him, but to show him that this flame still needed time to grow. The guardian was balance between allowing and sparing. Almost every culture that carried a figure like the Old One of Winter described one truth. He never walked alone. There were always shadows around him. No one knew what they were. Animals, spirits, fragments of himself. They appeared as long silhouettes, slow movements, dark forms sliding across the snow, shadows belonging to no body. Some believed they were tools of judgment. Others believed they were spirits of former guardians. Others believed they were echoes of souls lost to previous winters. The deeper truth is this. They were time itself. What had died, what was dying, what had yet to be born. The guardian did not care for individuals. He cared for the cycle. And winter was the only moment when all time could touch. Before he was Santa Claus, before he was St. Nicholas, before he became a cheerful giver of gifts, he was the spirit of transition, the silent judge, the guardian of the boundary, the messenger between worlds, the protector of the flame that had not yet gone out. And his presence still echoes. Every December, every cold night, every home that lights a small flame in the dark. Because for entities, this ancient, masks change, but purpose remains. There is a particular night at the heart of winter that ancient cultures feared more than any storm. A night when the sky seemed lower, as if it were leaning towards the earth to observe. A night when the wind stopped being wind and became a voice. They called it the Night of the Crossing. It was not a festival. It was not a celebration. It was a moment when no one slept deeply, because everyone knew the boundaries between worlds dissolved. And it is precisely on this night that the guardian, the Old One of Winter, awakened from his ancestral silence. You, living in the modern world, imagine Santa Claus traveling joyfully, laughing, distributing gifts. But this childlike image is only a thin layer, a fragile coat of paint over a symbol that was always far greater and far more feared. The true Night of the Crossing is not joyful. It is solemn. It is ritualistic. It is inevitable. The sky opens like an ancient eye. The ancients believed that the sky, on this night, was no longer merely a backdrop. It became a being. The stars gained movement. The darkness seemed to pulse. And there was a pale, bluish-white glow on the horizon, so subtle that only the elders noticed it. They said, "That is his trace, the guardian's path cutting through the sky." But this path was not physical. It was spiritual, as if the sky itself were responding to the approach of a presence so ancient it could not be understood. The glow was not light, it was memory. Memory of every winter that had ever existed. Memory of all the lives that had passed. Memory of the cycles that needed to continue. And where those memories crossed, the portal formed. The portal, not a door, but a fracture in time. People did not speak openly about the portal, not because it was forbidden, but because it was dangerous to name it. To name something is to call it, and no one wished to call the Old One. The crossing was expected, but never desired. It always happened in the same way. A sudden silence fell over the village. Animals stopped moving. The wind froze in the air, and for a few seconds it felt as though the world itself no longer existed. The ancients said, this is when he breathes between one world and another. That breath, long, deep, silent, was the sign that the portal had opened. It was not a visible portal. It was not a flash of light or a tear in reality. It was a crack in the natural order, a moment when everything became vulnerable. And here lies the most hidden detail. The Guardian does not come from the portal. He is the portal. He is the entity that carries within himself the meeting point between worlds. That is why his presence distorts the environment. That is why shadows stretch. That is why the air feels heavier. Where he steps, the boundary disappears. The weight of the crossing. The crossing is not a simple walk. It is a change of state. To understand this, imagine the surface of a frozen lake. Below it, the water moves. Above it, everything appears rigid. His presence is the equivalent of breaking the ice for a brief moment. Life and what lies beyond it mix, briefly, and the Guardian moves within that interval, like a fisherman of souls, but not to take them, only to count them. Yes, to count them. The Guardian does not choose who lives or who dies, but he records. He observes the cycle. He decides where the balance is breaking. This is the part no one tells. He does not give gifts. He does not reward goodness. He does not punish evil. He reads the energy of homes. He adjusts the balance. And what is that balance? It is the cycle of the seasons. It is the flow of life. It is the eternal dance of being born, growing, dying, and being reborn. The night of the crossing is the moment when this ancestral mechanism realigns, and you are inside this mechanism too, whether you wish to be or not. The houses he avoids. There are houses he simply passes by, without looking, without touching, without leaving any sign. In ancient accounts, these houses were called houses without flame. They are not evil houses. They are not corrupt homes. They are houses where nothing lives spiritually. Homes without rituals, without strong memories, without roots. Homes where people live as if they are not truly present. To the Guardian, such a house is invisible, because what he seeks is not walls, but echoes of the soul. The houses he observes. Then there are the houses he watches only from a distance. In these places the flames are unstable, families in conflict, broken bonds, heavy energy. He does not interfere. He only observes. He observes because the cycle is fragile there. If the imbalance grows too great, winter will collect on its own. Just as nature removes dead branches, he does not kill, but he allows. The houses that receive his presence. And then, there are the houses he enters. These houses hold something rare, a strong flame, an energy that resists winter, that pulses among the living, a spiritual center that keeps the home united. In these houses, the Guardian crosses the threshold, the same one we now call the chimney, and leaves a trace of protection. That trace is the origin of the gift, not material, not visible, not something that can be accumulated. It is cycle, and cycle is everything the Guardian protects. The question that opens the next chapter. If the Guardian is the boundary, if he is the crossing, if he is the living memory of winter, then one question remains. Where did he truly come from? And why does only he carry the key between worlds? The answer lies in chapter 4. Night falls slowly over you. The air feels heavier, colder, as if an invisible ancestral breath were hovering above the world. You sense, almost physically, that you are stepping into territory where symbols stop being metaphors and become something alive, pulsing, dangerous. This chapter addresses something few dare to touch: the spiritual price of being a guardian. What did Santa Claus, or the ancient entity that gave rise to him, have to sacrifice to assume this role? What was paid, and what continues to be paid, in silence, every single year? Prepare yourself. Here, you are no longer studying history. You are crossing the threshold where myth breathes, where the sacred bleeds, where winter guards secrets that do not dissolve, not even in sunlight. The guardian is not born. He is chosen. When we think of Santa Claus, we imagine a benevolent old man who distributes gifts and good intentions. But the primordial archetype behind this figure was not recognized by smiles. He was chosen, and being chosen was not a blessing. It was a sentence. The northern tribes believed that certain spiritual forces were so ancient, so vast, that they could not act directly within the human world without destroying everything around them. So intermediaries emerged, bridges, bearers, guards. They would be the eyes of the Force, the hands of the Force, and in rare moments, the sacrifice of the Force itself. The ancients called these intermediaries Oscarin, the one who is seen by the spirits. The name varied among peoples, but one thing remained constant. Oscarin did not choose his destiny. His destiny chose him, and always in winter. It was as though the cold revealed the invisible world that, in other seasons, hid behind human warmth. Winter functioned like a blade that stripped away the veil, and when the veil fell, the spirit required a body capable of carrying what it represented. Generosity and light, yes, but also control, judgment, and sacrifice. And this is where the ancestor of Santa enters the story. Not the commercial symbol, not the Catholic saint, not the literary character, but that first guardian, whose human existence still pulses behind every modern version of the figure. He was not a tribal leader, he was not a king, nor a priest. He was an ordinary man, a man who saw something no one was meant to see. The night of first contact. Northern oral tradition speaks of a night so silent that the world itself appeared to stop. A night with no wind, no animals, no sound at all, except the crack of ice breaking under its own weight. This kind of silence is not natural. The tribes called it the pause of winter, a moment when the physical world and the invisible world drew so close they touched, even if only for a few minutes. In that absolute silence, the man, whose name was lost, saw a light, not a warm light, not a welcoming light, a pale blue light that did not illuminate the snow, but passed through everything, as though it were looking inside things rather than at their surface. The light called to him, not with words, but with something deeper, as if it were pulling memories he did not even know he possessed. He walked towards it, and when he came close enough, he saw the shadow within the light. It was not a human spirit. It was not an animal. It was not a deity as stories describe. It was a solstice presence, a spirit that emerged only on the longest night of the year, when the boundary between life and death was so thin one could hear the world moving beneath the ice. The entity examined the man and did something simple, swift and final. It marked him, not with fire, not with touch, not with words, but with presence. The man collapsed into the snow, and when he awoke, he was no longer only himself. He had become the first guardian of winter, the archaic seed of what centuries later would be shaped into Santa Claus. And you must understand this. There was no choice. There was no escape. He would carry, every year, the weight of the entity he had seen. A weight never spoken of in modern stories. The weight, the law of giving and receiving. Northern traditions were obsessed with balance. Nothing was given without something being received. Nothing was taken without something being returned. The spiritual world operated through agreements. And the guardian, this marked man, became the central link in that balance. His function was not simply to bring gifts, as modern culture would later reinterpret it. That came centuries afterwards, as a weakened version of the original symbol. In the archaic tradition, the guardian represented something far deeper, the necessary balance between what we receive from darkness and what we return to the light. The tribes believed winter brought two things: material scarcity and spiritual abundance. And for that reason, winter was a season of pacts, offerings, and exchanges. Gift-giving was not kindness. It was spiritual obligation. If you received protection from the spirit of winter, you had to give something back. If you received food, you offered warmth. If you received guidance, you offered something that represented the year you had lived. And the guardian regulated that exchange. He did not give. He demanded. He observed. He recorded what was given and what was taken. The modern image of the Book of Good Children and Bad Children is a childish distortion of a far darker belief. The guardian kept record of the spiritual debts of each family. If a family offered little, it received little. If it offered nothing, then winter collected, and it collected harshly. Storms, cold, hunger, disease. All of these were seen as spiritual responses. The guardian did not punish, he observed, and that alone was an enormous burden. Imagine carrying the weight of being the intermediary between the human world and forces that have no obligation to be understandable. The secret sacrifice, the price of the bearer. The mark placed upon that first man carried an inevitable consequence. He did not age like others. His body did not die at the same pace. His mind stood apart from time. But something happened within him. Every winter, something was drained. Not energy, not soul, not physical vitality, memory. The entity needed to remain connected to the human world, but could not carry the weight of its own consciousness within a mortal body. So it drained fragments of the guardian's inner life. He never lost everything. He was never empty. But he forgot faces, dates, moments. He forgot parts of childhood, the names of children, the stories of the village. Every year, at the solstice, like a spiritual tax. This is why the guardian was depicted as old, not because of age, but because he carried the exhaustion of many winters where something of himself was taken. At his core, old Santa was never a figure of age. He was a figure of erosion. And the more winters he crossed, the more fragmented he became. The tribes knew this and kept it secret. After all, who would accept the responsibility of becoming the next guardian, knowing the price? No one. That is why the Spirit chose. The transformation through religions. When Christianity reached the north, it brought new interpretations for ancient symbols. The guardian was no exception. The figure needed to be domesticated, made acceptable, something that could enter churches without carrying the scent of paganism. And so, the ancestral spirit and the man who carried it were divided. The generous aspect became St. Nicholas. The judging aspect became Knecht Ruprecht. The dark aspect became Krampus, the winter demon. The exchange aspect became Father Winter. The spiritual aspect became the North Star. But the Guardian himself remained hidden. History did not wish to confront the idea of a human carrying a winter entity. It did not wish to confront the price. It did not wish to confront fading memory. So it created legends, poems, carols, until centuries later he became what we now know as Santa Claus, a disarmed symbol, harmless, almost fragile. But the shadow of the ancestral guardian never vanished, merely moved behind the curtain. The silent god of the solstice and the unbroken circle. The aspect most obscured by cultural distortion is this: the guardian was never solely a human figure. He is the temporary body of a spirit that remains very much alive. The spirit was not worshipped. It was not feared. It was not loved. It was recognized. And recognition maintains balance. When societies began to treat winter merely as climate, and not as a spiritual phenomenon, the guardian did not disappear. He was simply masked. Modernity did not erase the pact. It merely forgot it. But spiritual pacts do not depend on human memory to exist. The circle continues, the spirit continues, and the guardian continues. Every December somewhere someone feels an unnatural silence, a blue light upon the snow, the breath of something ancient, the mark being chosen. Some say it is symbolic, others say it is real. But the ancestral tradition is clear. As long as there is winter, there will be a guardian. And as long as there is a guardian, there will be a price. The question you do not want to ask, but must, if modern Santa Claus is only the shell, the diluted version, the caricature of something far deeper, what happens to the true guardian? The answer is neither simple nor comfortable. He exists, but not as we imagine. He does not deliver presents. He does not travel the world. He does not command reindeer. Those are symbols. What he truly does is far more fundamental. He keeps winter balanced. He keeps the spiritual world contained. He pays the price so the cold does not cross the line. Without him, the solstice would not be a night. It would be a force. And forces do not negotiate. The guardian is the wall, the mediator, the barrier between the visible and invisible realms. And the most disturbing truth, he exists only because he was chosen. And those who are chosen are never warned, never prepared, never protected. They are only marked, like that first man who saw the blue light in the snow. What was forgotten, and why remembering is dangerous. When the modern age softened ancient traditions, few noticed the risk of that softening. Forgetting symbols is harmless. Forgetting pacts is not. In the ancestral view, when a symbol weakens, the pact destabilizes. And when a pact destabilizes, it collects. Winter grows harsher. Storms become unpredictable. Darkness stretches longer. Energies grow denser. Many believe this begins when the guardian loses symbolic strength, because the world stops respecting his function, even unconsciously. In a way, modernity turned the guardian into a joke, and the ancients said the spiritual does not accept ridicule. The figure of Santa Claus, as charming and commercial as it may be, still carries the final layer of the ancestral pact, a layer thin as newly formed ice. That is why winter feels different, why nights seem longer, why so many feel an unexplainable unease in December. Something within us still recognizes, something that was never erased. The final secret of the chapter. You have come this far, and perhaps you are wondering, does the current guardian exist? Is he alive? Does he know what he carries? The answer is as simple as it is unsettling. He does not need to know. The mark knows for him. The entity does not choose prepared people. It chooses those connected to silence, to night, to cold, to the threshold. People who feel winter differently. People who see more than they should. People who wake at night for no reason. Always on the same day. Always at the same hour. If you have ever felt this, you have been closer to the mark than you realize. The real question is not whether the guardian exists. The real question is, what happens when he can no longer carry the weight? That belongs to the next chapter. Winter breathes. You can feel it, even now. There is a kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that does not wish to be heard. And it is within this silence that the world changes. If by now you understand what the guardian is, this chapter reveals something more dangerous. What happens when he is about to fall? And what happens when another is chosen? Ancient northern belief held that no guardian could carry the mark forever. No matter the strength, the faith, the health, the courage, all yield before the passage of winters. And the mark of the solstice, though sacred, was never gentle. It gives slowly, and it takes violently. This chapter is about that, the gradual death of the guardian, and the inevitable birth of the next. The guardian does not die like others. The original guardian, and all those who came after him, did not follow the natural cycle of the human body. The mark they carried kept them alive, but not untouched. They did not age normally. They did not fall ill normally. They did not dream normally. When a guardian began to weaken, it was not wrinkles that revealed it, not the voice, not white hair. It was absences, small absences, then larger ones, and finally, abysses. The first thing to be drained is childhood memory, then simple emotional memories, names of loved ones, dates, places, everything scraped away like ice beneath a blade. Then came the second phase, the draining of identity. The guardian began to forget himself, his own story, his motivations, his beliefs. And this is when the mark takes control, automatically, instinctively, like an invisible hand guiding an empty body. It is disturbing, but the ancients believed that when a guardian was very close to falling, he became more silent, more observant, more distant, more neutral, and deeply melancholic, as if he were looking at two realities at the same time. And perhaps he was, because when the guardian weakens, the original spirit begins to observe directly, and that almost always means the cycle is about to change. The 4 signs of the fall over centuries, the tribes recorded 4 clear signs that a guardian was nearing his end. They called these signs the 4 lights of disappearance. They are not visible lights. They are manifestations of the spiritual within the physical. Anomalies produced by winter when something ancient is about to occur. Sign 1. Disproportionate silence. Some winter nights become absurdly quiet. Too quiet. No wind. No falling snow. No animals. No cracking sounds. The kind of silence that seems to look back at you. This silence appears repeatedly. Always at the same hour, always on the same side of the sky. It was believed this was the spirit preparing the passage, the gradual disengagement of the current guardian's mind. Sign 2. The blue light in the snow, the same light that marked the first guardian. A pale, translucent blue light, almost the color of a coal flame. It does not illuminate the surroundings. It illuminates inward. Ancient accounts describe people seeing this light at forest edges, in clearings, frozen valleys, or atop hills. It never approaches. It never retreats. It never flickers. It simply observes. It is the call. And when this light appears, the transition is near. Sign 3. The irrational fatigue of winter. During what may be the Guardian's final winter, the climate becomes unstable, unpredictable. Snowstorms appear without cause. Winds change direction suddenly. Temperatures drop within minutes. The ancients said this happened because the Guardian could no longer hold the spirit, as if the entity were testing the world without the mediator's presence. It is the rehearsal of the storm. Sign 4. Collective forgetting. This is the most frightening sign of all. When a Guardian is about to fall, the entire village begins to forget things, even those unrelated to the bearer of the mark. They forget where objects were placed, conversations they had, appointments, family stories, simple memories, as if the spirit were draining cognitive energy from the entire community, not out of malice, but necessity. The mark must survive, and survival means finding a new bearer. When an entire community begins to lose its sense of time, it is because the spirit is searching. The process of choice, the lost moment, the selection of a new guardian is something no one consciously witnesses. And this is not an exaggeration. Those who see, forget. Those who are present, erase. Those who awaken, do not remember. The tribe believed the process occurred in 3 invisible stages. Stage 1, the solstice gaze. The blue light appears to one person, not to the entire village, not to leaders, to someone specific. That person does not feel fear. They feel a calling that is not a voice, but a deep curiosity, as if winter itself were watching them. This first stage is always subtle. There is no clear vision of the entity, only the sense that the world has become attentive. Stage 2, the approach. The chosen person begins to dream frequently of snow, wind, white paths, a hooded figure, or a pulsating blue star. These are not ordinary dreams. They leave emotional marks. One wakes cold, even beneath blankets, sometimes with a dry throat, as if having walked for hours. And above all, the dream repeats at the same hour, almost always between 2 and 3 in the morning. Stage 3, the final mark. This stage was never described directly because no one could remember it, but there were signs, solitary footprints in the snow, circular marks in the ice, animals calm yet alert, lights in a clear sky, and the chosen one waking with a sensation impossible to explain. The feeling that something had been placed inside them, as if winter had breathed through their skin. And then the cycle begins again. The true death of the old guardian when the new one is chosen. The old guardian does not die immediately. He fades, slowly, silently, patiently. The oldest accounts say the final guardians were seen in the days that followed, wandering without direction, staring at the horizon, stopping before trees, sitting in the snow without discomfort, speaking little or not at all. It was as if the spirit were removing the final layers of human identity, retrieving everything that had been borrowed, until, eventually, he disappeared. Some believed he died, others that he became part of the spirit itself, others that he dissolved into winter, No one knew. No bodies were ever found. No remains. Only absence. The invisible inheritance. There is something fascinating and unsettling about northern traditions. They claim the new guardian does not receive everything at once. The spirit does not deposit its full force into a new body, because that would destroy any human being. Instead, there is a period known as the crossing of the 3 winters. For 3 years, 3 solstices, the newly chosen guardian matures spiritually. First winter, he feels the presence, feels the weight, but the spirit still acts more through instinct than consciousness. Second winter, he begins to hear thoughts that are not his, but they do not feel invasive. They are more like guidance. Third winter, he becomes effectively the guardian in full form, capable of regulating the balance between the physical and invisible worlds. Only after these 3 years is the cycle complete. And curiously, it is also during the 3rd winter that he must face the first spiritual payment, a ritual entirely forgotten in the modern version of Santa Claus. The guardian must offer something extremely precious to the spirit, something that represents his bond with the human world. The ancients called this the sacrificial gift. It was not an object, not gold, not food. It was a memory, an extremely valuable memory, the most important or the most painful memory of one's life. It could be a first love, a final farewell, the birth of a child, a moment of greatest happiness, or the most transformative memory. The guardian had to give something that hurt, because the pact had to be real. Who can be chosen? Here is a crucial, rarely mentioned truth. The mark does not choose good people. It chooses deep people, people who carry inner silence, sensitivity to winter, heightened perception, introspection, restless nights, and a strange familiarity with solitude. The mark does not choose leaders, kings, or warriors. It chooses those who live alongside their own shadow, people who understand absence, people who carry questions they have never spoken aloud, people who see the world with the sense that something exists behind everything and always has. The ancients used to say, the guardian is not the best among men. He is the one who carries winter without breaking. Modern winter and the weight of the mark. You may be thinking, but what about today? Does the guardian still exist? Is there still a choice? Is there still a spirit? The ancestral answer is direct. Yes. Modernity erased nothing. It merely dimmed it. The spirit does not depend on human belief to exist. It does not depend on rituals. It does not depend on tradition. It exists because winter exists. And winter is a spiritual phenomenon before it is a climatic one. In recent centuries, there have been signs, not proof, of new guardians emerging unnoticed. People who sleep poorly during the solstice, feel unexplained chills, dream of snow while living far from it, wake at the same hours, sense presences on cold nights, feel emotional for no clear reason in December, experience flashes of memories they do not recognize, and feel that winter speaks somehow. The traditions call this the whispers of the mark, when a soul begins to sense the entity, even before being chosen. It means the current guardian cycle is nearing its end, and when the cycle ends, the spirit calls and chooses and marks. The question you were afraid to ask, this entire chapter has led you here. The unavoidable conclusion, is the current guardian falling? If the signs are appearing, disproportionate silence, unpredictable winters, strange sensations, repeating dreams, then perhaps, yes. And if he is falling, the next one is already being observed, perhaps in a Nordic village, perhaps in a great city, perhaps in a tropical country, perhaps somewhere no one would expect. The mark does not respect geography, it respects depth. The final secret of the chapter. The ancients left behind a sentence, hidden within ritual scrolls few dared to translate. It speaks of the passage from one guardian to the next. It says, "When the old one fades and the new one awakens, the snow breathes twice. The first breath belongs to the departing guardian, the second to the guardian who is born. After that, the world moves on. Winter continues. Balance stabilizes. The mark strengthens. Until everything begins again." The final secret of Noel. The longest night of the year. The longest night of the year has arrived. And even if you are only listening to this story, perhaps in the early hours of a cold night, perhaps while rain taps against the window, there is something within it that awakens an ancestral sensation, as though your memories were touching something guarded long before your birth. Because this chapter is not merely the end of a narrative, it is a doorway. And once you cross it, you will understand what the figure the modern world calls Santa Claus truly represents. So take a deep breath. The final story begins now. 1. The night when the world stands still. There is a silent tradition that only a few cultures preserved. It says there is a point in winter, precisely at the threshold between the day that dies and the day that is reborn, when the entire world seems to hold its breath. Animals retreat. Forests fall still. Cities slow down. The wind shifts direction. It is an almost imperceptible moment, yet deeply profound. A moment when the universe clears the board and prepares the next cycle. Ancient peoples called this moment the white stillness. It was the second when nothing grows, nothing decays, nothing moves. The sacred interval between ending and beginning. And it was in this exact instant, they believed, that the most mysterious figure of all would walk. The guardian, the old man of winter, the one who, long before being called Noel, was seen as the spirit who opened the new cycle of humanity. Because he was not merely a myth, he was a living symbol. And that symbol had to be activated every year. 2. The final rite. Imagine a temple, not a modern one, but a semicircle of frozen stones deep within a Nordic forest. Natural fire lamps flickered inside iron vessels. At the center stood a throne made of ancient wood. There, centuries before Christianity, commerce, and colorful marketing, he would sit, the first Noel. Clad in thick furs, long beard, eyes hardened by cold and wisdom. But he did not come to be worshipped. He came to perform the most important ritual of all, the rite of the rebirth of the inner fire. Each village brought something to offer the old man of winter, but they were not objects. They were intentions, hidden fears, promises, suppressed desires, guilt, hope, gratitude. All of this was placed into a small wooden box called Kalskar and left at the guardian's feet. He would touch the box with his aged hand and, according to the stories, feel its invisible contents. Then something inexplicable would happen. The central fire would change color. Blue turned to green. Green became deep red, and red vanished, leaving behind a silent white light. The light of rebirth. He did not give physical gifts. He returned relief. He returned clarity. He transformed the weight people carried into an emptiness filled with meaning. That is why he became the symbol of the gift. Because long before delivering toys, Noel offered something humanity has always needed, and still needs: inner renewal. 3. The forbidden transformation. But what you may not know is that this rite nearly vanished, not through forgetfulness, but because at one point in history, someone tried to stop the Old Man of Winter. Forgotten documents hidden in Germanic monasteries describe a curious event. A winter so severe that entire villages were erased. Nothing grew. Mountains cracked beneath the ice. Animals disappeared. The sun did not rise. It was called the Night of the Eternal Winter. Religious leaders panicked. They claimed that the guardian, the silent figure walking between the physical and the spiritual, was losing his strength. And when something like that happens, something must replace it. They decided the rite would be ended, that the world needed a new symbol, more domesticated, more controllable. But the people did not accept this. They knew what Noel did was not superstition. It was a form of spiritual balance, maintenance of the bond between humanity and nature. So quietly, far from the eyes of authority, they continued the ritual in secrecy. That is why, despite centuries of repression, the figure never disappeared. It adapted, changed names, changed clothing, changed form. But the archetype did not die, because, and this is the most important point of the chapter, it could not die. The guardian was never a man. He was a function, a role within human consciousness, a cyclical energy that always returns. 4. The Queen of Winter. Now comes a part almost no one knows. The guardian never walked alone. Records speak of a presence as ancient as he was, perhaps older. The Queen of Winter. Not a queen in a romantic or political sense. Not a goddess with a body, a face, or human traits, but a primordial feminine force representing pause, withdrawal, silence. If the guardian was the spark, she was the ice that preserves. She ruled dormancy, introspection, fertile emptiness, stillness. While the guardian carried the inner light that was reborn, she was the cosmic womb where that light rested before awakening. The two symbols, masculine and feminine, spark and rest, heat and ice, worked together in the ritual. But over the centuries, she was erased from tradition. Noel was left alone, and that explains much. The modern world transformed the guardian into a symbol of constant action, delivering, producing, doing. The introspective half, hers, was forgotten, and everything forgotten returns distorted. That is why a period meant to be sacred became the most consumer-driven time of the year. Among ancient peoples, the winter ritual only worked when both symbols were present. The force that ignites and the force that preserves. The masculine that renews and the feminine that silences. Inner fire, outer cold. Noel remains the visible part. She remains invisible. And when you understand this, you realize the true magic of winter is not in red, green, or gold, but in the balance between these forces. 5. The hidden message in gifts. Now you understand why the act of giving gifts did not begin as material exchange. The symbol of the gift is, in truth, a coded remembrance. The real question was always, what must you leave behind in order to be reborn? People offered the guardian a symbolic expression of their burdens, and received back the fire that cleansed those burdens. When the world turned this into boxes, ribbons, and colourful paper, something was lost, but not everything. Because even today, without realising it, people try to reenact the original rite. They give gifts seeking reconnection. They attempt forgiveness. They search for pause. They reflect on the year. They feel the urge to begin again. Even without knowing the ancient name, they are still participating. The symbol survives because the archetype does not depend on belief. It depends on human need. 6. The final secret. The guardian who awakens in you. Now we reach the deepest point of this chapter. There is a reason the Old Man of Winter, Noel, is portrayed as someone who enters people's homes. It is not a folkloric detail. It is a spiritual metaphor. To enter the home means to enter the center of consciousness, the place where we keep what we show no one. The guardian does not visit fireplaces. He visits the human interior. What ancient peoples truly believed was that on the night of the white stillness, each person needed to perform a small inner rite, to withdraw, to face their shadows, to acknowledge mistakes, to give thanks for survival, to ask for clarity, and to light a symbol of fire, real or imagined, because according to them, the guardian does not rebirth alone. He is reborn through you. That is why the figure never vanished. Even though the world turned the rite into commerce, the essence remains alive in every human who, in the darkness of winter, feels unexplained longing, melancholy, the desire to begin again, introspection, a silent call inward. That is the guardian knocking. And if you understand this, you have activated the symbol. You have awakened the invisible side of winter. You have become the guardian of your own flame. 7. The ending, and also the beginning. We have reached the end of the 6 chapters. But as has always been the case with this figure, the end is never truly the end. Every story of Noel ends in rebirth. And this one is no different, because there is something few people notice. When you hear the full story, when you understand the Queen of Winter, the Guardian, the Rite, you change subtly. And that change is exactly what ancient peoples believed to be the true gift. Not an object, but a moment of inner recognition, a small point of light in the darkness, a flame you carry into the next cycle. Because according to ancient traditions, winter only ends when the light within the human being awakens. So while the night outside remains cold, while the wind whispers at the windows, while darkness surrounds everything, breathe. Feel the cycle beginning again. Feel the ancestral stirring within you. Feel the guardian walking inside your own consciousness. And understand one final truth. Noel does not visit houses. He awakens people. And if you listened until now, then this was your right. Before you leave this night behind, I want to ask you something simple. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Different lands, different winters, yet somehow the same story found you here. If even a small part of this journey resonated with you, if this story stirred something quiet within you, consider staying with us. Join the channel. Return on other nights like this one. And if you feel it deserves it, leave a like. Not for the algorithm, but as a silent sign that the flame reached you. Until the next crossing, may your inner fire remain awake.